There are people who pass through our lives like a breeze, gentle, silent, almost forgettable. And yet, months or even years later, something stirs. A melody, the scent on an old shirt, the way a stranger looks at you for half a second too long, and suddenly, your breath catches. It wasn't because they were the most beautiful. It wasn't because they were the kindest. It's because, somehow, they held up a mirror, and in it, you saw something you had long buried. Not them, but you. Imagine this. You're standing before a mirror that doesn't reflect your body, but your soul. And just for a moment, who do you see? It's not their face that stays. It's the feeling of being exposed. The soft terror of being seen, not for who you try to be, but for the fractured, yearning self beneath the armor. They didn't fix you. They didn't stay. But they touched something raw. A shadow. A silence. A story you stopped telling yourself a long time ago. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Perhaps they didn't love you the way you needed. Perhaps they were chaos wrapped in a warm voice. But in their presence, your unconscious stirred. And that's why you can't forget them. Not because they were your destiny, but because they awakened something unfinished in you. We often ask, why can't I forget them? But maybe the real question is, what part of me did they reflect, that I've never dared to face alone? Then let us begin to descend, quietly, into the cavern beneath the mind, where Jung's language does not instruct, but reveals. The shadow, the projection, the unconscious. These are not ideas to memorize. They are truths to remember, because you've met them before. In dreams. In the gaze of someone who triggered you too quickly. In the way your voice tightens when someone gets too close. Jung called the shadow, the thing a person has no wish to be. It is not evil. It is not darkness for the sake of harm. It is you, unlived. All the parts that were shamed in childhood. All the impulses you learned to suppress to survive. The anger, the fear, the hunger for attention, the longing to cry, the wild, the tender, the jealous, the needy. You hid these parts not because they were wrong, but because you were once too small to carry them safely. And so, the shadow became an orphan within you. But the unconscious does not forget. What we reject inwardly, we will see outwardly. Jung called this projection, the act of casting our inner world onto the outer stage. You fall for someone, convinced they are kind, powerful, capable of saving you. But it is not them you love. It is the strength you have not yet claimed in yourself. You resent someone, swear they are arrogant, manipulative, too much. But it is not them you hate. It is the part of you that is terrified of being seen the same way. In Jung's words, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The unconscious lives below language. It speaks in symbols, in patterns, in the way you keep dating the same person in different bodies, in the dreams where you run but cannot scream, in the sudden emotional storm that has nothing to do with the present moment. It's not madness, it's memory, and love is where the unconscious becomes visible. Because in love, we let our guard down. We make room for someone else inside our psyche, and without realizing it, we hand them the mirror. We don't see them clearly. We see what we lack, what we crave, what we once feared. We see our shadow, dressed in their body, and that is why love wounds so deeply. Because we are not only grieving the person, we are grieving the story they pulled out of us. The story we never told. The one that, through them, almost found its voice. So when they leave, it's not just their absence we mourn. It's the silence that returns, the mirror that vanishes, and perhaps the most haunting thought of all. Did they ever really see us? Or were they only ever reflecting what we had forgotten we were? It begins quietly. A message left on read. A delayed reply. A subtle shift in tone, like someone slowly closing a window while pretending everything is fine. At first, you tell yourself it's nothing. They're just busy, tired, caught up in their own world. But somewhere deep, below the logic and excuses, something in you knows, the dance has changed. This is how many modern love stories begin to unravel. Not with a storm, but a slow disappearance. You feel them slipping, yet they're still around. Still liking your posts. Still smiling when you meet. Still saying, "I miss you," but only after you say it first. This is the era of emotional ambiguity, where presence doesn't mean connection, and absence doesn't mean goodbye. Where people orbit you like moons with severed gravity, too afraid to land, too scared to leave. But why? Why do they pull away just as things begin to feel real? Why do they come closer when you finally let go? Why do they say they care, but act like ghosts? To understand this, we must go back, further than the last relationship. Back to where we first learned love. For many, love was never unconditional. It came with rules, moods, the unpredictable temperature of the household. A parent who was there, but not present. A caregiver who loved, but only when you behaved, pleased, performed. You learned that love meant walking on eggshells. That your feelings were too much. That needing someone made you weak. That the safest thing to do was not to need at all. And so, you grew into an adult who craves intimacy but flinches when it arrives. Who longs to be seen, but hides at the first sign of real vulnerability. Jung understood this. He wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because to be seen is to be exposed. And to be exposed is to risk rejection." So what do? We develop defenses disguised as personalities. Some become the avoidant. They keep people at a safe emotional distance. They say things like, "I'm just not ready," or "I don't know what I want," while unconsciously reenacting the detachment they once experienced. Others become the anxious, constantly fearing abandonment, needing reassurance, overthinking every pause in communication. They aren't needy, they're scared. Scared that if they don't perform affection, they'll be left behind. And some oscillate, pulling close, then pushing away. Wanting intensity, but panicking when it arrives. This isn't immaturity. It's unprocessed pain. What looks like indecision is often a nervous system still living in the past. Let me tell you about a man. We'll call him Elias. He was in his late 30s. A calm presence, thoughtful, slow to speak. He had a way of making women feel like the only person in the room. And yet, they all told the same story. He just disappeared. No explanation. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. Elias didn't know why he did it. He'd meet someone, feel drawn in, let himself hope, and then, just when he started to feel truly seen, he'd vanish. A text left unanswered. A plan forgotten. A wall quietly erected. In therapy, it unraveled. He wasn't afraid of love. He was afraid of being needed. Because as a boy, he was his mother's emotional caretaker. Her little man. Her confidant. There was no room for his feelings, only hers. Love became responsibility. Affection became pressure. So now, when a woman leaned in too far, his body remembered the weight, and bolted. His silence wasn't cruelty. It was protection. Not for her. For the child in him who once carried too much. We all have versions of Elias within us. The woman who chases unavailable men because her father was never really there. The man who distrusts intimacy because his feelings were once mocked. The one who ruins good love because the body cannot tell the difference between safety and captivity. Carl Jung taught that until we become conscious of these patterns, they own us. Not because we're broken, but because the child in us is still looking for resolution in adult love. And so we repeat. Until one day, someone reflects the exact wound we thought we buried. And we can no longer run. It does not begin with fireworks. It begins with recognition. A glance that feels like déjà vu. A stranger who feels strangely familiar. You tell yourself, I've met them before, though you haven't. Not in this lifetime. But maybe, just maybe, in the forgotten corridors of your psyche, they were already waiting. There's something about them that calls you. Not the usual thrill of attraction. Not lust or charm. But a pull. Ancient, haunting, magnetic. You laugh more easily. You open up faster. But beneath the surface, something deeper stirs. A trembling. A memory. Not of them, but of a part of you long buried. This is what happens when two shadows fall in love. Not your curated self. Not their polished mask. But the unseen, unhealed, unspoken meeting in the dark. Jung called this the anima and animus, the feminine in the man, the masculine in the woman, archetypes living in our unconscious, always seeking wholeness. Not through perfection, but through projection. You don't fall in love with the person. You fall in love with the image, the part of yourself you exiled now mirrored in their eyes. They laugh the way you never let yourself. They cry with the softness you once ridiculed in yourself. They carry the freedom, the chaos, the wildness you learned to suppress to survive. And suddenly, you're drawn, obsessed, enchanted, not by them, but by the feeling of finally touching what was once forbidden. But here's the catch. You think you're loving them, but you're loving the reflection of your own shadow in them. This is why, at first, it feels divine. They complete you. They get you. You speak in silence. Finish each other's sentences. You feel less alone. But as the glow fades, something shifts. They begin to disappoint you. The things you once adored now irritate. Their intensity feels suffocating. Their mystery becomes distance. You start asking, were they always like this? And the answer is yes. You just stopped projecting. As Jung warned, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Love, in its purest form, is a mirror and a fire. It shows you yourself, and burns away your illusions. When two people meet in shadow, they meet in incompletion. Each hoping the other will carry what they cannot yet hold. Each unconsciously asking, will you love this part of me I've never learned to love? But no one can carry your shadow for you. No one can love the parts of you that you still exile. So what begins as ecstasy can quickly become chaos. Because eventually, the image shatters. And you're no longer looking at your fantasy. You're looking at a real person, with their own wounds, projections, and shadows. The man who once made you feel protected now makes you feel controlled. The woman who once felt like your salvation now triggers your abandonment wound. You say, they changed. But perhaps, you finally saw them. And this is the crossroads. Some run. Some cling. Some repeat the cycle again and again, chasing the original high. But a few, very few, stay. Not to fix the other. Not to lose themselves. But to face the mirror together. These rare ones learn to speak shadow. To say, this is mine. That is yours. But here, in the space between us, something ancient is unfolding. And in doing so, they begin the real work. Not of falling in love, but of waking up through love. Because the one you can't forget is not just a person. They are a portal to the part of yourself you were once too afraid to meet. It begins subtly, always subtly. A look of awe in their eyes when they speak about you. The way they describe you to others, as if you're not entirely real. The reverence. The pedestal. You become more than human. You become a symbol. Carl Jung warned of this danger, to become the projection screen for someone else's unlived life. To be not who you are, but what they need you to be. It feels flattering at first. They say you saved them, that you healed them, that no one has ever made them feel this way. They write you poems, send you long messages at midnight, speak of fate, of signs, of things that only happen once in a lifetime. But somewhere deep inside, a tension grows. because you feel the weight, the pressure to remain extraordinary, to keep shining, to keep playing the role they cast you in. And one day you realize you are no longer being seen. You are being worshipped. They are not loving you. They are loving the idea of you. This is the moment you go from lover to symbol. You become the father they never had, the mother who didn't stay, the ex they couldn't let go, the dream they never chased. You are the vessel for their healing, the stage upon which their unconscious scripts play out. And the most painful part? They don't even know they're doing it. In Jungian terms, they've activated an archetype, an image from the collective unconscious. You are no longer John or Sarah. You are the savior, the temptress, the wounded healer, the muse. And with every projection, you disappear. Your flaws must be hidden, your needs minimized. Your humanity becomes inconvenient. Because to stay on the pedestal, you must remain perfect. But no one can be a symbol forever. Eventually, you break character. You have a bad day. You forget to call. You say something human. And their world cracks. The same eyes that once adored you now look confused, betrayed, even cold. Because when a symbol disappoints, the illusion collapses. They do not mourn you. They mourn the fantasy, the myth, the mirror they mistook for a soulmate. And you are left wondering, did they ever really love me at all? Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, including turning you into their escape." But this isn't about blame. We've all done it. We've all projected light and shadow onto lovers, hoping they'll carry what we're not ready to face. The question is not, why did they do this to me? The real question is, where have I done the same? Who have you turned into a story? Who have you idealized so intensely that their collapse felt like your own? Whose silence shattered not just your heart, but your belief in magic? To be loved as a symbol is intoxicating. But to be loved as a person, that's where healing begins. That kind of love doesn't worship. It witnesses. It doesn't ask you to perform. It asks you to be. It doesn't run when the cracks appear. It stays and traces the lines with gentle fingers, saying, "Even here, you are still whole." But few are ready for that kind of intimacy. Most are still chasing ghosts, still turning people into poems so they don't have to write their own. And so, if you've been turned into someone's symbol, if you've felt the dizzy high of being adored and the hollow ache of being discarded, it is not your fault. You simply stood in front of someone, and for a moment, reflected their shadow too clearly. There is a silence that follows rupture. Not the kind that begs to be filled, but the kind that reveals. It settles slowly, after the last message left unanswered, after the final, "Take care," after the realization that no explanation is coming. You sit with it, not because you choose to, but because there is nowhere else to run. This is not heartbreak in the way movies portray. No sobbing under the rain, no shattered photographs. It is subtler, more existential. It is the moment you realize they weren't just a person. They were a portal to every part of you that still longs to be held. And now that they're gone, you're left alone with yourself. This is where the journey turns inward. No more asking why they left. No more dissecting their words. No more rehearsing the alternate endings. Now, the questions begin to shift. What part of me did they awaken? Why did their absence feel like returning to an old wound? What unfinished story did I try to complete through them? You begin to see it wasn't them you were mourning. It was the mirror they held. And without that mirror, you are left with your own reflection. Raw, unfiltered, unromanticized. This is the real grief. Not of losing a person, but of facing the shadow they revealed. Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." And in love, sometimes we don't lose the other. We lose the language we found in them. The secret way they touched something wordless inside us. The parts we didn't even know were speaking, until they answered. So what now? Now, you breathe. You sit with the discomfort, not as punishment, but as passage. You let the silence expand, not to drown you, but to echo with memory. You begin to reclaim what you once gave away. The tenderness, the longing, the brilliance you saw in them, you take it back. Not to erase them, but to recognize. It was always yours. They only mirrored it. They were only the shape your soul needed to see itself again. And maybe, if you're very still, you'll feel a strange kind of gratitude. Not for the pain, not for the ending, but for the fact that once, for a moment, someone saw you in a way you hadn't yet dared to see yourself. And now, the work is yours. To become the witness you once searched for in another. To turn your gaze inward, not with judgment, but with reverence. To stop running. To stop projecting. To stop waiting for someone to carry the part of you you keep leaving behind. Because maybe the one you can't forget was never meant to stay. Maybe they came only to return you, to you. And now, in this quiet, there is no lesson, no conclusion, no ribbon to tie the story closed. Only this, a room, a mirror, and a question that echoes long after the final frame fades to black. If I saw myself the way I once saw them, would I ever feel unloved again? If you're still here, still listening beneath the silence, still holding your breath between the words, then maybe you weren't just watching a story. Maybe you were remembering your own. And if this touched something unnamed in you, if it stirred a forgotten ache, if it brought you closer to yourself, then maybe, just maybe, you're ready for what comes next. You can subscribe if you feel called. Not because this is the end, but because somewhere in the shadow, something beautiful is just beginning.